Hello everyone and welcome in to Coach Craig's Sports. This is the NFL DFS Core Pick video for Week 4. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how this week's video will be structured. I will be going over my core picks for both DraftKings and FanDuel. It's going to be one player at each position. Definitely don't have to play all 5 together, but some guys that I do want to highlight for this week's slate overall. I will also be posting my NFL DFS cheat sheets down in the comment section of this video. They can also be found on the YouTube community tab, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and on the sports affiliation website. So definitely feel free to check that out. A very good free resource for both sites. If you're interested in a larger player pool beyond that, definitely feel free to check out my Patreon page, a very small monthly donation over there. You get access to my NFL DFS player pool for a month, as well as my CFL DFS content and NFL snap count spreadsheets. But without further ado, we'll get right into it with the core picks. We're going to start off on the DraftKings side at the quarterback position. We're going to go with Caleb Williams this week, going against Las Vegas Raiders. It's a really attractive matchup, averaging just under 24 fantasy points per game. He's at $5,800, so a very reasonable price tag. He's had at least 18 DraftKings points in all 3 games so far this season and has shown some decent upside in his second season. And then we're going to move down to running back with Cam Scatterboot of the New York Giants. He's at $5,500 this week, currently averaging just over 13.5 fantasy points per game. Goes against the Los Angeles Chargers, who historically have not been the greatest against running backs, especially in recent seasons, although they're looking a little bit better this year. But the volume should be there for Cam Scatterboot with Tyrone Tracy out for this week's game overall. So definitely do like the upside that he could have at a very attractive price tag. And then we're going to move down to wide receiver. We got Rome Odunze to pair with our Caleb Williams, making a little stack here. He's at $6,300, currently averaging just under 22 fantasy points per game. Been a very, very successful second year for him. He's kind of looking like that wide receiver one for this Bears team, and that is no disrespect to DJ Moore, but nice to see the Rome Odunze break out in year number 2. And I definitely do like his potential in this matchup. The Raiders quarterbacks are nothing that is going to scare you whatsoever. I definitely do like any wide receiver pretty much any given week that is going against that Raiders cornerback room, especially on the outside. And then we move down to tight end. We're going to go with Hunter Henry, coming off a really strong week in his own right. So he's up to $4,000, currently averaging just under 14 fantasy points per game. Goes against the Carolina Panthers, so a very attractive matchup there. Drake May's leaning on him a little bit early and often. If he goes out there, if he scores a touchdown once again, going to look like a really good play overall. And then last but not least, we're going down that Colts defense once again. So we played them last week in our core picks. Definitely do like them once again this week at $2,600. Kind of a punt play defense, but they've had turnovers in both games. I believe Cam Bynum has an interception in both games. So definitely do like the upside that they could potentially have going against the Los Angeles Rams, although this game might be a little bit of a shootout. But if they can get some turnovers at a relatively cheap price tag, definitely do like their upside just in general, and currently averaging just under 10 fantasy points per game. But with that being said, if you go with the 5 players that I do currently have listed here, $25,800 remaining, just under $6,500 remaining per player. So a good amount of money remaining, whether you want to go with a little bit more balanced approach, whether you want to pay up for a couple of studs, pay down elsewhere. Definitely a lot of approaches that we can go for this week overall. Think personally it's looking a little bit more like a balanced build type of week just in general, but definitely feel free to mix and match as you do see fit. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about my core plays over there as well. So on the FanDuel side, at the quarterback position, we're going to go with Patrick Mahomes. He's at $7,800. Pretty attractive matchup going against the Baltimore Ravens, whose defense has not looked pretty good so far this season. They're allowing a lot of points and a lot of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes averaging just under 21 fantasy points per game so far on the season. So definitely do like his upside in this matchup. Unfortunately, he's had to run a little bit more, scramble out of the pocket because the offensive line has not been the greatest. But that does give him some additional rushing upside, which makes him a little bit more intriguing for fantasy purposes at the same time as well. And then he also does get Xavier Worthy back this week, who is returning from his shoulder injury that he did ultimately suffer in week number 1. Then we moved in a running back with Cam Scatterboot. He's at $5,400, currently averaging just under 12 fantasy points per game. Goes against the Los Angeles Chargers, kind of like I mentioned on DraftKings. Historically, the Chargers have not been the greatest against opposing running backs. However, they are doing a little bit better so far this season. It is a little bit smaller sample size, but definitely do like the upside that Scatterboot could have just in general, especially with the volume that he's getting with Tyrone Tracy out for this week's game. And then moving down to wide receiver, we're going to go with Michael Pittman Jr. He's at $5,800, currently averaging just over 13 fantasy points per game. Goes against the Los Angeles Rams. They're kind of middle of the pack so far against fantasy wide receivers, But I do like Michael Pittman Jr. in this matchup with some size going against those Rams corners. A lot of their corners are not the tallest either, so I definitely do like him for a touchdown in this game. And then beyond him, Alec Pierce is also going to be out, so there could be a couple extra targets to go around in this matchup as well. And then we move down to tight end. I'm going to go with Travis Kelce, so we make a little stack here with Patrick Mahomes. He's at $6,100. Currently averaging just over 8 fantasy points per game on the season. I know he's probably going to draw a little less ownership with Xavier Worthy coming back this week. I'm not super concerned about it. I think it is an attractive matchup just in general. Baltimore Ravens haven't been the greatest so far versus opposing tight ends, so there is some potential upside to be had there at the same time as well. And if this game ultimately ends up being a shootout, Travis Kelce is probably going to be a piece that you do want in your stack just in general. And then I will say on the opposite end of that game, Mark Andrews at tight end is another guy that I do have a lot of interest in, especially on the FanDuel side where he's at $5,300. And then last but not least, we're going down to the defense. I'm going to go with the Patriots defense here at $4,300. Currently averaging just over 7 fantasy points per game. Goes against the Carolina Panthers. For the most part this season, the Panthers have not been the greatest. I know last week they did look a little bit better against the Falcons, but the Falcons played really poor on offense, which really helped out that Carolina team just in general. And they also did have a pick-6 return for a touchdown, so that definitely helped their scoring output. But I like the Patriots in this matchup, especially if Christian Gonzalez ultimately is back at corner. I have not looked too deep into that yet at this point in time. I think he's either questionable or back this week. So hopefully he's back, and that could play a pretty big role going against Ted McMillan. And the Panthers do have some injuries on offense. Jatavian Sanders is going to miss. Chuba Hubbard's questionable at this point in time. So there are a lot of factors and a lot of signs pointing to the Patriots defense being pretty good overall this week. And then on the opposite end of that game, if you wanted to roll out the Panthers defense as a punt play, they are pretty interesting on FanDuel, especially with the Patriots missing multiple offensive linemen for this week's matchup overall. But with that being said, if you go with the 5 players that I do have listed here, you have $30,600 remaining, just over $7,600 remaining per player. Kind of like I mentioned on DraftKings, looks a little bit more like a balanced build type of slate just in general, but definitely feel free to build out your lineups as you do see fit. Stacks will play a pretty big role, I do believe, this week. A lot of teams that I am highly interested in stacking overall. So I definitely think it's going to be a really good and interesting slate just in general. But with that being said, these are my core picks for DraftKings and FanDuel for NFL DFS for week number 4. As always, if you have any questions related to NFL DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And then once again, I will be posting my NFL DFS cheat sheets down in that comment section as well. You can also find them on the YouTube community tab, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Blue Sky, or the sports affiliation websites. So definitely feel free to check out and use that for your resource. And then if you are interested in a more in-depth player pool, feel free to check out my Patreon page. Once again, very small monthly donation over there. You get access to my NFL DFS player pools for a month, as well as my CFL DFS sheets and NFL snap count spreadsheets. So definitely some useful tools over there. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now we have NFL DFS. In terms of the core pick videos, they will be coming out once a week, either on Friday or Saturday. It's going to vary a little bit week to week. And then I also do have my CFL DFS video coming out once a week, typically on Wednesdays. So definitely feel free to check that out if that's something you're into or want to check out for the very first time. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for BetUS and Prize Picks. If you are a brand new user to either one of those sites, when you sign up, make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Prize Picks, it's 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's 125% match up to $2,000. So some pretty great opportunities to be had out there. If you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comment section of this video or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for this week's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some good luck in NFL DFS for week 4.